What if I told you that the UFC's next megastar might not be Conor McGregor, not Jon Jones, not Israel Adesanya, but a wolf from Chechnya who fights like a storm and carries the aura of an unstoppable beast? What if the future face of the UFC is a man who has barely tasted defeat, who smashes opponents in minutes, and who is now staring down the reigning middleweight king, Dricus Du Plessis? Today, we're breaking it all down, from Khamzat's unstoppable rise, to DDP's warrior heart, to the cultural storm surrounding this fight, and whether a victory here could make Khamzat bigger than Conor, bigger than Khabib, and maybe the most electrifying fighter the UFC has ever seen. So, let's dive in. The rise of Kamzat Chimaev. Kamzat Chimaev didn't just arrive in the UFC, he exploded. In 2020, when the world was stuck indoors searching for hope, Khamzat came storming into the octagon with a ferocity fans hadn't seen in years. He wasn't just winning, he was dominating. 10 days, 2 fights, 2 brutal finishes, that was all it took. Overnight, fans started whispering, "Who is this guy?" Dana White couldn't stop talking about him. Fighters started avoiding his name, and in the middle of a pandemic, when the UFC desperately needed a star, Khamzat became the light. The way he fights is simple, yet terrifying. He doesn't dance, he doesn't play safe. He storms across the cage, lifts his opponent, slams them, and smashes them with a grin on his face. Enter Dricus Du Plessis. Now, let's talk about Dricus Du Plessis, or as fans call him, DDP, the South African powerhouse who shocked the world by becoming UFC middleweight champion. DDP is not your typical flashy fighter. He doesn't have the slick striking of Adesanya, he doesn't have the wrestling pedigree of Khamzat, but what he does have is a warrior's spirit, insane durability, and a knack for breaking his opponents down. When he fought Robert Whittaker, many thought he was just another name. Instead, he bulldozed Whittaker, something nobody saw coming, and then he dethroned Sean Strickland to take the middleweight crown. DDP is the kind of fighter who looks beatable until he isn't. He eats shots, he looks tired, and then he comes back swinging with a storm that breaks the will of even elite fighters. And now, fate has lined him up against the wolf himself, Kamzat Chimaev. The clash of styles. This is where things get interesting. Khamzat's game is pressure, relentless wrestling, pure chaos. If he gets on top of you, the fight usually doesn't last long. Just ask Li Jingliang, who was picked up, carried across the cage like a child and choked out while Khamzat smiled at Dana White. On the other hand, DDP thrives in the storm. He may get taken down, he may get controlled early, but he has that grit, that rare ability to take punishment, adjust, and come back stronger. This is not just a fight of skill, it's a fight of will. Because make no mistake, if Khamzat smashes DDP in dominant fashion, it will send shockwaves through the entire UFC. Can Khamzat actually do it? Let's be real, some fighters look invincible until they meet the one opponent who doesn't play along. Remember Ronda Rousey? She was the face of the UFC until Holly Holm exposed her striking and knocked her out cold. Remember Khabib? He retired undefeated because nobody could solve his puzzle. Khamzat walks the line between these two extremes. If he beats DDP, he could become the next Khabib, an unstoppable champion, a global superstar. But if DDP weathers the storm and breaks him, Khamzat could become another what-if story. And that's what makes this fight so compelling, the global factor. Now here's where it gets even bigger. Khamzat is not just a fighter, he is a global phenomenon. He's Chechen-born, he represents Sweden, he fights in the Middle East, and he has fans across Russia, the Arab world and beyond. This matters because the UFC has always looked for fighters who can draw international audiences. Conor brought in Europe, Khabib brought in the Muslim world, Israel Adesanya brought in Africa. Khamzat has the potential to unite multiple regions at once, the UFC star power formula. Let's pause for a second. How do fighters actually become superstars in the UFC? It's not just about winning. Plenty of dominant fighters never become mainstream. It's about 3 things. Dominance, fans love winners who look unbeatable. Personality, Conor talked. Khabib stood for honor. Jon Jones was chaos. Moments, you need those highlight reel nights that people never forget. Khamzat already has dominance, he already has personality, the smash everyone wolf persona. What he's missing are those legendary moments on the biggest stage. Defeating Dricus Du Plessis for the middleweight belt could be that moment. The Conor effect versus the Khabib effect. Let's compare. Conor McGregor didn't just become a star because of knockouts. He became a star because he knew how to sell a fight, how to make fans love him or hate him, and how to back it up with highlight finishes. Khabib became a star by being the immovable wall. He didn't care about trash talk. He cared about dominance, respect, and legacy. Khamzat sits somewhere in between. He has Conor's aggression and confidence, but also Khabib's aura of dominance. That balance could make him the perfect storm for UFC superstardom. But again, it all rides on DDP. What happens if he wins? Let's say Khamzat does it. He storms DDP, smashes him, and becomes champion. What then? The UFC will have a new megastar. He'll headline cards in Abu Dhabi. He'll sell out arenas in Europe. He'll be the face of Middle Eastern expansion. And with stars like Jon Jones, Conor McGregor, and Khabib either retired or near the end, the UFC desperately needs a new face. Khamzat could be that face. What happens if he loses? Now flip it. If Dricus Du Plessis beats Khamzat, the aura of invincibility breaks. The wolf suddenly looks human. And in the UFC, once that aura is gone, it's hard to get it back. Remember Darren Till? Remember Cody Garbrandt? One loss turned into many, and the hype faded. That's the razor's edge Khamzat is walking. One fight, one moment, one destiny, real-world parallels. This isn't just sports. It's life. Think about it. Every great figure in history had a make-or-break moment. Elon Musk nearly went bankrupt before SpaceX landed a rocket. Muhammad Ali became a legend the night he shocked Sonny Liston. Michael Jordan was cut from his high school team before becoming the GOAT. Khamzat is standing at his own crossroads. Beat DDP, and he becomes immortal. Lose, and he may just become another talented fighter who almost made it. The biggest star in UFC history? So here's the million-dollar question. If Khamzat wins, could he actually become the biggest star the UFC has ever seen? Let's break it down. Conor was massive, but his fame was built on personality and knockouts. Khabib was massive, but he retired early. Jon Jones is a legend, but his controversies kept him from being universally loved. Khamzat has the chance to combine the dominance of Khabib, the charisma of Conor, and the global reach that no fighter has ever had. If he smashes DDP, the Wolf might not just be the next star, he could be the biggest star in UFC history. So here we are, the Wolf versus the Warrior, Kamzat Chimaev versus Dricus Du Plessis. One man fights with ferocity, the other with grit. One fights like a storm, the other like a mountain. And standing in the middle is destiny itself, because when that cage door closes, it's not just about a title, it's about who will carry the UFC into the next era. Will it be Dricus Du Plessis, the South African warrior who refuses to break, or Kamzat Chimaev, the wolf who smashes everything in his path and rises as the biggest star the UFC has ever known? The answer is coming, and when it does, the UFC may never look the same again. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, because this story is just getting started.